Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Raisina Dialogue and the Future of Conflict session, How Will Democracies Respond? Much has changed since we last met in Delhi about a year and a half ago. We've of course had a global pandemic and a new US president, amongst other things. But what appears to persist is the challenges involving China. We've seen China tensions from the Himalayas to the Taiwan Strait. And when we met then, we discussed the return of great power rivalry being the central challenge of our time, and the oceans of the Indo-Pacific the central front of this evolving struggle. Arguably, Chinese aggression is galvanizing the Quad, made up of the US, Australia, Japan, and India, to draw together. So the question then is, why are they doing it now? And why are they doing it? That is the subject of this panel, and with us to discuss this further are military and defence leaders from across the region and world. Joining me now is General Angus Campbell, Chief of Australia's Defence Force, General Koji Yamazaki, Chief of Staff, Joint Staff of the Japan Self-Defence Forces, General Bipin Rawat, India's Chief of Defence Staff, Tim Cahill, Vice President, Lockheed Martin. I'd like to begin with you, General Yamazaki. China is dramatically expanding its military activity around Taiwan. The US is concerned China is flirting with seizing control of Taiwan. Can the US and Japan develop a joint plan for how to respond to scenarios around Taiwan?
ですね。まずですね、日本をですね、取り巻く環境につきまして、話した後にですね、台湾について話をしたいと思います。
First of all, I would like to briefly present about the security environment surrounding Japan. Then we would like to get into the actual situation.
近年ですね、我が国を取り巻く安全保障環境は格段に速いスピードで厳しさと不確実性を増しております。我が国周辺におきましては、中国の軍事力の急速な近代化や軍事活動の活発化に加えて、独自の主張に基づく力を背景とした一方的な現状変更の試みや自国に有利な戦略環境の作為や影響力の拡大を基とした行動がより顕在化しています。
Well, under the circumstances, the security environment surrounding Japan has become increasingly severe and uncertain at the remarkably rapid pace in recent years. The situation in the area surrounding Japan has been increasingly characterized by the attempts to unilaterally change the status quo by force, based on the assertion with the rapid modernization of the military forces and also invigorated military activities, which aiming to create a favorable strategic environment and expand influence.
東シナ海においてはですね、近年航行の自由、上空飛行の自由の原則に反するような行動事例が多数見られています。こうした事例は現状を一方的に変更し、事態をエスカレートさせたり、不測の事態を招いたりしかねない非常に危険なものであり、我が国として懸念する状況となっています。
In recent years, there have been many cases of behavior in East China Sea that inconsistent with the principles of the freedom of navigation and overflight. Japan has great concern that these incidents are extremely dangerous, as they could unilaterally change the status quo and escalate the situation or even cause the contingencies.
南シナ海においても一方的な現状変更及びその既成事実化の一層の推進や高圧的な不測の事態を招きかねない危険な行為が見られています。
As well as in the South China Sea, there have been a number of dangerous actions that could lead to unilateral change in the status quo by the advancement of the establishment of the fait accompli, as well as the cohesive and also unexpected situations.
海洋をめぐるですね、情勢について、中国は本年2月に海警法を施行し、この海警法は曖昧な適用海域や武器使用権限と国際法との整合性の観点から問題ある規定を含んでいます。
The situation regarding maritime affairs, China recently enacted the new Coast Guard law in February this year. The law contains the provision that have programs from the viewpoint of consistency with international law, such as ambiguous applicable sea area, as well as the on the use of weapons.
この回帰法により、我が国を含む関係国の正当な利益を損なうことはあってはならず、東シナ海、南シナ海などの緊張を高めています。
The China's Coast Guard law must not deteriorate the legitimate interests of Japan and other countries concerned, and it is absolutely unacceptable that it will heighten tensions in the East and South China Sea and other sea areas.
こうした行動は法の支配を弱体化、不安定化させるなど、既存の国際秩序に対する挑戦であり、国際法やルールに基づく国際秩序の維持は、このインド太平洋地域における喫緊な課題と言えます。
These actions are a challenge to erode and destabilize the existing international order. Maintaining the rule-based international order is an urgent issue in the Indo-Pacific region.
南シナ海、東シナ海、また我々の尖閣諸島、また台湾においてもですね、非常にこの中国の現状変更に対する試みというものについては不安定要因になっています。
And in South and East China Sea, as well as the areas surrounding Senkaku Islands, and including also the areas surrounding Taiwan, the China's unilateral attempts to change the status quo now becoming the unstabilizing factor in the region.
台湾の周辺地域も含んで、その平和の安定というものについては、日本も含むインド太平洋地域の平和と安定に直結しています。
Therefore, peace and stability in the area surrounding the Taiwan directly reflect to the peace and stability not only Japan but also entire Indo-Pacific region.
よってこの地域と平和と安定を図るためにはこの事態を抑止をする、発生を抑止をすると、そういうようなことが重要であり、また日米、またその、価値観を共有する、インド、またオーストラリア、その他の国々と適切に連携をしていくということが重要だと思っています。
Therefore, in order to preserve the peace and stability of this region, it is critically important to deter any kind of contingencies to occur in that area. Therefore, it is necessary for us to closely working with the United States as well as the like-minded countries such as India and Australia.
So, General, can I just pick up on that point? When you say that it's important that we work together, in your view then, should our militaries be actively planning for scenarios in terms of Taiwan? For example, if X happens, we do this. If Y happens, then we do this.
ですね、その件につきましてはですね、やはり地域の平和と安定のための取り組みというのはいろいろございます。そこの細部についてはコメントすることはできませんけれども、やはり地域の平和と安定にはいろいろな国が連携を図っていくということが当然重要だと思います。
For the matters, actually, there are various items and initiatives that we will be able to carry out for the peace and stability of the region. But as from my standpoint, I just would like to not to comment in detail. However, there are so many various countries can undertake all kinds of attempts for that reason in various ways.
So can I just pick up on that then and say, General, do you view Taiwan then as a red line?
台湾のですね、問題の等につきましては、台湾とですね、それぞれの当事者同士がしっかりと解決すべき問題だというふうに思っております。我々はこの地域の一員をなすものとすればですね、しっかりとその取り組みを、連携をとって、対応していくということです。
As for that matters, it is necessary to be solved by the actual actors of the issues. So Japan, as the nation part of this region, will obviously will make our own effort to address the matters in that regard. However, that is the answer for my for that question.
一つですね、付け加えると、非常にこの地域の、事態というのは、やはりその日本の防衛にも直接的な関わりがございます。
However, I just wanted to add a comment that any kind of probable contingency in that region is directly impact on the defense of Japan.
よって、この地域の平和と安定は、我が国の平和と安定に直結しますので、この、中国に面している、日本とすればですね、しっかりとそのことが起きないような抑止力を、抑止の体制を駆使していくことが重要だと思っています。
Therefore, in other words, the peace and stability of this region is directly influenced Japan. As Japan directly facing China, it is necessary for us to carry out our utmost effort to deter any kind of occurrence of the contingencies, so that we will maintain to our deterrence posture in the system.
Okay, thank you, General Yamakazi. I just want to come to General Campbell. What would happen if indeed China did attack Taiwan, and if the US does intervene in Taiwan, it could trigger a much wider war, dragging Australia in?
Thanks, Yolda. It's great to see you again. And could I thank the Raisina Dialogue for the invitation to be part of this panel. And hello to my very good friends, General Yamazaki and General Rawat, and also to Tim Cowell. You ask a very challenging question. Look, I'm going to offer a more general response, Yolda. Conflict, from the perspective of democracy, is always our last resort, and diplomacy our first. We're living in a time where both diplomatic and military weight and effort working in complement is tremendously important. We need to see opportunities and to drive possibilities to create new arrangements, new friends, new structures, new experiences that build the idea of stronger together. Australia is very clear that the future of China and Taiwan needs to be a future that is resolved peacefully. Conflict over the island of Taiwan would be a disastrous experience for the peoples of the region, and it's something that we should all work to avoid. There is a pathway to a future through peaceful dialogue, but it's a hard path and it needs to be worked.
General Campbell, I suppose then, if I take the question further and say, is joint planning for Taiwan contingency, if we talk about that, is it appropriate for trilateral efforts for Japan, the United States and Australia to have joint planning for Taiwan contingency?
Yolda, each of our countries represented, and all countries, militaries, undertake a whole variety of planning. They rarely ever talk about it. It's part of what we do. Military organisations are planning organisations. What we do very actively is seek to build the relationships that strengthen interoperability and cooperation and capacity and potential. For example, between Australia and the United States, a very long ally, Australia and Japan, working with Australia, Japan and the United States. Working with India, a relationship that we are growing and is of great potential, and we really appreciate that relationship. But the point about building relationships, generating interoperability, the capacity to work together and to understand the interests and the worldview of others, is both to lessen the potential for conflict and if necessary, be more effective in conflict, and where there are circumstances of potential conflict and potential adversaries, you create a much more complex conflict calculus in the minds of adversaries about what happens when we're not on our own, but when we're working together. And that's why I really like that idea from a military point of view that we are stronger together.
Australia's former Defence Minister Chris Pyne this week said Australia will likely be dragged into a war with China in the next 5 to 10 years. What's your reaction to that?
He is a very experienced and long-term parliamentarian and senior minister before he retired. And I listened to his perspective, of course weighted with a whole range of other factors. And for me, the story in the Australian Defence Force is always one of being ready today and being prepared and building readiness for the future. And so rather than pick a conflict or create a potential future, the Defence Force of Australia and all defences need a variety of options and capacities to deal with what I think is going to be a very complex future. And that's exactly what we do. And so I listened with interest to former Minister Pyne's comments and put those as part of the jigsaw of a very complicated strategic environment.
General Rawat, let's bring you in and talk about the Himalayan frontier. Why is China picking a fight with India, and why now?
Firstly, my compliments to General Yamazaki, General Campbell, Tim Cahill, and of course Yalda. I am indeed privileged to be part of this syndicate during the ongoing Raisina dialogue. Now, before I get on to what has been happening on our northern frontiers in Ladakh, I think let's understand how the situation around the globe is changing. And I dare say that the geopolitics coupled with the geoeconomics is indeed seeking to reshape the rules that govern the world order. There are some nations which follow international order. There are others which depend on their own lawfare. They make their own rules and regulations, try and changing status quo. And therefore, these kind of things do lead to conflict situations. And that is what we are witnessing on our northern borders. And therefore, we are witnessing changes in the geopolitics shaped by a nation-first approach. Today, nations feel that we need to authoritatively pressurize other nations if they can, and that is what is leading to a changed security situation. And the world is now becoming fragile on account of threat from hybridization of warfare. So nations feel that they have arrived with better technologies and therefore threaten other nations which probably do not have that kind of technology and seek the technological advantage into conflict, and therefore they are trying to become more and more assertive now. And very soon we may find that adversaries may get embroiled into conflict with one of the other nation even being unaware that they are actually into conflict. And therefore I think unconventional means of conflict employed by clever use of disruptive technologies could actually paralyze the networks, causing breakdown of systems, banking, power grids, transportation, communication, to name just a few. And therefore, nations which have developed these kind of disruptive technologies feel that they will be able to impose their will on the other nations by saying that if you don't come to my terms, I have other means of bringing you into conflict through unconventional means. So people are trying to become nations, are trying to become assertive. And this is what I think China attempted to say that, it is my way or no other way. But I think such nature of undeclared war will place dilemma in the minds of decision makers whether or not to resort to kinetic force and thus be labeled as an aggressor. So, it is trying to draw you into a conflict without you starting the conflict, but resorting to disruptive technologies. It is very difficult for nations then to decide that Do I now resort to conflict through use of kinetic means? Will always be putting a dilemma on the minds of adversaries. And therefore, while militaries around the world are seeking innovative systems to enhance their combat capabilities, disruptive technologies, on the other hand, will compel nations to rethink their concept, doctrines, and techniques of warfighting. And that is what China is evolving to do. It is trying to get into a a limited conflict through informationalization of their systems, thinking that we are superior in technology and the adversary may not be able to stand up against us and will therefore succumb to these kind of threats. But what I feel we need to do is to ensure that it is quality and not quantity of war fighting machinery that will necessitate changes in the structure of our organizations. There's something which we are looking at. Technology will indeed play an important role in the manner in which nations perform in the future. Now, through the weaponization of the social media, the internet is changing war and politics, just as war and politics are being changed by the internet.
I suppose, General Rawat, arguably Chinese aggression is galvanizing the Quad to draw together. So while you say, they may be trying to pick a fight to show that they are the superior power, one would ask why they're doing it when it's actually bringing the Quad closer together.
Well, as I said, they feel that they have arrived. They have a superior armed force because of the technological advantage that they have. They have been able to create disruptive technologies which can paralyze systems of the adversary, and therefore they feel that just by doing a little bit of shove and push, they will be able to compel nations to give in to their demands. But I think India has stood firm on the northern borders, and we have proven that we will not get pushed. And I think in whatever we have been able to achieve in standing firm, in preventing a change of status quo, we have been able to gather world support, and I think the international community has come to our support to say that yes, there is an international based rule order which every nation must follow, and that is what we've been able to achieve, and that is what we are trying to gather support from the other international nations. They have tried to ensure that they can change the status quo by the use of disruptive technologies without using force. As of now, they have not used force, and they thought that India as a nation will succumb to the pressures that they are putting on us because of the technological advantage that they have.
General Rawat, what are your views on the treatment of Uyghurs in Xinjiang?
I didn't get the last part of your question.
The treatment of Uyghurs in Xinjiang province?
Well, in our nation, we've always believed that every community, irrespective of the religion that they follow, their caste, their creed, their color of the skin, I think everybody has equal rights. And as far as humanity is concerned, the world must stand together in ensuring that people get their human rights as they deserve. So I think it is a call that the international community needs to take.
I just want to ask you about Afghanistan, General Rawat. Americans are abandoning their Afghan allies. Does this raise questions in the Indo-Pacific about American wherewithal more broadly? And also, how does the withdrawal from Afghanistan impact India? What does it mean for India?
Well, we have concerns about Afghanistan. Afghans have been at war for rather long, and we would like to see peace and tranquility returning to that region. If the US feels that by their withdrawal and similar follow from the NATO allies who say that we will also like to possibly withdraw, that is what we are reading from the media, that in case US withdraws from Afghanistan, NATO will follow suit. But if that is going to ultimately lead to peace and tranquility, we would be happy to see such a situation emerging. But our concern is that the vacuum that is going to be created with the withdrawal of United States and NATO should not create space for other disruptors to step in, and therefore the violence continues in Afghanistan. We would be very happy to provide whatever support we can in the development of Afghanistan and making sure that ultimately peace returns to that nation. I think the people basically have got tired and are looking forward to peace, and if the Americans can bring that peace in by their withdrawal, which I believe the Taliban says if the Americans withdraw, there will be less fighting there. And if that can happen, I think then it should be a happy situation. But in the end, we must see peace and tranquility returning to Afghanistan.
When you say other disruptors, namely Pakistan, Iran?
Well, there are many nations that are willing to step into Afghanistan. And I wouldn't just would like to name one nation. There are many people who are looking at the opportunity to walk into the vacuum that is being created. Afghanistan is a nation which is rich in resources. And there are nations we know who tend to exploit resources for their own benefit without the benefit going to the community of that nation. So if that is going to happen, I think that should be prevented, and the international community must step in to ensure that Afghanistan is for the Afghans.
Okay, let's bring in Tim Cahill from Lockheed Martin. Tim, there's a view that despite talk about great power competition, the US Defense Department is continuing to buy legacy weapons. And when I talk about legacy weapon systems, I'm talking about submarines, fighter jets, tanks. And while that made sense a decade or two ago, it's not investing enough in the kind of disruptive technologies that General Rawat just talked about as well for a fight with China or Russia. What is your response to this?
Thank you, Yal. And first of all, thanks to you, thanks to my esteemed colleagues and the Ministry of External Affairs for letting me join this great panel today. You know, I think that it's not an either or, and I believe that the United States and many of the great nations that are represented here recognize that we have to move beyond just a platform view or an individual weapon view. But those tools are still critically important to our future. What we do need to do, I think everyone is recognizing rapidly, is to be resilient in some of the future fights that we may have, and to, in fact, network our systems together. And this takes on multiple names depending on where you are, whether it's multi-domain operations, whether it's net-centric warfare. At Lockheed Martin, we call it 21st century warfare, but it means turning every one of those individual weapons that you talk about, and you say their legacy, that has a little bit of a connotation with it. You know, things like the F-35 are incredible networked weapons with the ability to tie into other systems. We can backfit that kind of capability on other systems as well and build resilient networks that, in fact, can adjust to what our adversaries are doing, because they're getting much smarter and much more capable. They're watching what we're doing. They're watching our exercises and responding. What's important, you mentioned a plan earlier, what's important as we go into these situations is not necessarily that we just have a general plan of what we're going to do, but that we can rapidly respond when, in fact, as we know, every plan changes when you make first contact. And so if you have a resilient system of very capable platforms all tied together in modern ways and exchanging data and responding real time, then you have a different sort of capability than you had before. And to us, that's what's very important looking forward for the future.
You just mentioned the F-35. The chairman of the House Armed Services Committee says the F-35 is a case study in everything that is wrong with what the Pentagon buys. What's your response to that?
Well, I think, there's been a lot discussed about the F-35. I will say that from our view and from, I think, the view of the United States Air Force and the Pentagon itself, the F-35 is the most capable fifth-generation system on the planet right now. It now is at a price point that is, in fact, less than legacy fourth-generation fighters, so it's cheaper. It's significantly better. The maintenance costs are coming way down, and in fact, nations around the world, and many of the nations here represented in today's panel, have made the decision to buy F-35s and continue to look hard at, as their future militaries, they are buying more F-35s and reconfirming the capability of that system. So we continue to compete worldwide. We do it on the facts and the merits and the capability and the cost and the industrial partnerships that we provide with the system, and the system continues to win and continues to gain the confidence and the loyalty and frankly the word that we continue to get back from when we talk to pilots and we talk to militaries around the world is that they couldn't be more glowing in the capability that the platform brings. So, there's always a lot of opinions out there, and we respect those opinions, and we work hard with the congressmen and others. But respectfully, it's an incredible platform, and is the right platform for the allies of the nation of the United States and those represented here for the future.
General Rawat, you're not buying F-35s.
Well, our Air Force is still exploring the options of the the aircraft that they need to buy for their force. F-35 is a very modern aircraft and state of the art. I'm not sure if the US would be willing to share this kind of technology with the other nations, because what they've offered to us is the lower version of the F series. So we would like to see what is on offer, and we will be very soon floating a global RFI for the kind of aircraft that we wish. Yes, it is a very good modern aircraft, and that will put the United States Air Force on a different plane altogether when they get this aircraft. It is state of art. I think it's a great aircraft. Yes, that's what I would like to say.
Tim, space has become a domain for competition, and China is investing massively in it. What, in your view, will that look like in the future, and what does that mean?
Well, I think they have invested massively in it. I think what they recognize is that the allied democracies of the world have a great advantage, or had a great advantage in space, and great capability, and it is the enabler. It ties us all together and ties our economies together, frankly, even beyond just military capability. What it means is that we have to be prepared. They are going to be disruptive. They are going to bring offensive capability, I think, to space in the end. And we've got to be prepared, just like we are in air and sea and land, is to be resilient, to again be able to adapt. If they come after space assets, be able to adapt in different ways with resilient networks and capability that ensure that we can respond appropriately. So we have the lead, I think. We have great capability in that particular regime. It's very, very critical to us. And I think we need to continue to protect those assets and make them as resilient as we can for future conflict.
I've got about 10 minutes to go, so I just wanted to open up the floor to some questions from the audience. And we've got one here for General Yamazaki. General, one area, and someone from the audience says this, one area that will not change even as specific threats evolve is grey zone conflict, below the threshold of war. India is all too familiar, but this is becoming an increasingly favoured Chinese tactic across the Indo-Pacific. These are challenging for states and conventional militaries to address. So what options are open, or what changes can be made to better adapt to the increasing nature of conflict?
ですね、質問の意味は、非常にこの平素からのグレーゾーンの脅威が高まっているということに対して、いかに対応するかということだと思いますが、それについて答えます。
Well, my understanding about the question is, recently, from the ordinary time, we've seen all those gray zone kind of like a situation. So the question is how we are actually going to cope with such kind of gray zone in ordinary time.
That's right, yeah.
I'm going to pass that question.
ですね、非常に平素もですね、非常に競争段階がですね、であって、この従来の陸海空のですね領域に加えて現在サイバー、宇宙、電磁波のですね領域についても非常に重要なその戦いもしくは抑止をしていかなきゃいけない場であるということを認識をしています。
Well, from the peacetime, there has been a lot of phases of the competitions. Not only the conventional domains such as ground, maritime, and air, but also new domains such as cyber, outer space, as well as the electromagnetic spectrum. So these domains are also now a very important kind of battle, sort of like the field of fighting, as well as the domains that we must actually undertake our deterrence as well.
またですね、 法律戦というものがありますけども、中国の海警法が設定されましたけども、独自の法律を設定をして、それに基づいて国際秩序を変えていくというような戦いも繰り広げられています。
So, namely, there is the lawfare that has been undertaken by China, such as they newly enacted the China's Coast Guard law, which they're attempting to unilaterally establishing their own legislation or the law to change the existing international order.
自由で開かれたインド太平洋を構築をしていく、またこの地域の平和と安定のためには、やはり法の支配に基づく、国際秩序が特に重要だと思います。
Therefore, in order to realize the free and open Indo-Pacific, as well as to preserve the peace and stability of this region, it is necessary to maintain the rule-based international order.
よって平素からこのグレーゾーンにおいてもですね、我々が構築していたその法と秩序を、同じ価値観を共有する国々が、しっかりとその国際秩序を守っていく、法律戦、またその宇宙サイバーのですね、なかなか見えない世界でも、ありますけれども、そこで連携をとって法と秩序を守っていくということが、とても重要な状況だという認識しています。
So therefore, the gray zone in peacetime, it is necessary for us to protect and defend the law and order in cooperation with the like-minded countries, namely such as the lawfare as well as the invisible type of like warfare, which is cyber domain type of confrontation needs to be dealt by the all those like-minded countries to protect the law and order.
その意味において今日ですねパネルで参加している私の友人であるアラバットインド参謀長、またキャンベルオーストラリア司令官、またアメリカからはケイヒルロッキードマーチン副社長、アメリカサイドありますけれども、やはり日米豪印しっかりとですね連携を図っていくということがさらに求められていると思います。
Therefore, here in this panel, now we have General Vivian Lallet from India and my good friend General Angus Campbell from Australia, as well as the Vice President of the Lockheed Martin, Mr. Cahill from United States. So these kind of like cross collaboration and cooperation among those four nations, Japan, United States, Australia, and India, is critically vital and important now.
Thank you. Thank you so much, General. I just want to pick up on this same question to General Campbell. If you can give us your thoughts on China really using grey zone conflict as sort of a tactic and the increasing hybridization of conflict.
Thanks, Yolda. This isn't a new tactic. Nations have sought to nibble away at arrangements that they are uncomfortable with for thousands of years. What we see in the modern era, though, with the opportunities of a globalized internet environment, we can see scale and ubiquity and instantaneous action through the cyber domain. And if there is a will, you can see in places like the South China Sea the effort at effectively changing the norms or rules on the ground. Now, I would say that these are always challenging tactics because they place the dilemma in those at which they're directed. How do you respond? How do you maintain and pursue your interests, legitimate interests in a global community, while not seeking to breach that barrier into open conflict? I think two things are really important here. One is about the idea of making sure that the shields around your own democratic institutions and the fundamental elements of your sovereignty are protected. And the other is that you are very clear on what are your national interests and what are those common or overlapping interests with other nations, so that you are clear why you're pursuing a particular course of action. And then there will be occasions when sunlight remains an extraordinarily powerful disinfectant. And so sometimes illuminating the issue and in doing so potentially galvanising a much wider community of common interest can be very powerful. And I think, and I don't speak just of one country, I think we are seeing this happen more frequently now as the trend towards the misuse of that grey space between norms and rules and the outbreak of conflict is very commonly being exploited.
Great, thank you, General Campbell. Can I go to Tim? There's a question here for you which says, as we tackle emerging threats, whether space or cyber or others, can legacy defence contractors keep up with the upstart disruptors and bring their more vast resources to bear on new niche problems?
Well, we think the answer is yes. We think we are. And by multiple ways. First of all, we're building partnerships with commercial companies. That's very much key to what we're doing right now, trying to bring commercial technology. The disruptors, I think, keep us on our toes if we're not already on our toes, and I think the competition is good. But we're working hard to actually bring them into the fold, have them help us help them with looking at how to get involved with national defense systems and then bringing us additional technology. But there's great innovation and technology, I think, in the big companies already as well that we're bringing to bear every single day across the world.
Thank you, Tim. General Rowett, there's a question here for you which says, India in the middle of reorganisation of its defence forces, with you driving and implementing these changes, what specific focus is being given to these new and emerging domains of conflict? The new and emerging